All right. Well, we're going to call the works. We're good. Melissa, can you hear us? You there?
I can now,
We
yes.
weren't talking before about you, honestly.
That's all right.
All right. Well, now I can call the work session to order since Melissa can officially hear us. So we got one thing on the agenda and one thing only, and we're going to talk about utilities.
Over the last several months, we've discussed the future of our utilities and rates. Tonight, we're planning to shift focus just a little bit and examine the history of our projects and rates in order to set the stage for where we are now. The information will help us understand where we've been as we continue to proactively plan for the future of our community. We've talked for a long time about doing this update, and I'm glad to be able to present this information now. Rick will provide historical and comparative data, and Jack will provide a context for our utility needs as they relate to community growth. Then our next larger discussion about our utility funds will be as we start the fiscal 26 budget process. So with that brief introduction, I will turn it over. As I said, Rick is going to start us out and take us through the bulk of this presentation.
All right, thank you. I'll wait till this presentation gets up here. All right, as Cynthia said, tonight we are going to review the history of projects, the history of rates, the result of replacement and rehabilitation projects, past and present development and capacity issues, and then kind of end with future development and projected cash flows of the city. And as Cynthia kind of alluded to, during the presentation, we will see how the city has historically taken a reactive approach to repairs and maintenance. And over the last 6, 7, 8 years, we've changed that to a proactive response, which has allowed us to start focusing on bigger projects. First off will be the history of projects. As you can see here, we went back 20 years on a lot of this data, and from 2004 through 2016, 17, major projects just were not happening. This is, again, where we were in the reactive mode, trying to repair and maintain without having any kind of replacement or rehabilitation program started. There's 3 notable bumps here. The first one is in 2017-18. This is when the South Interceptor project started, and this was related to sewer. Then again in 2020, 2021, that bump was related to the raw water pump project, and this was in regards to the water supply. And finally, there at the end, as we were getting into 23, 24, and now 25, this is where we are focusing on the utility systems pretty heavily. And we are now hitting the projects that have been outlined in the 2018 Water Master Plan and the 2021 Wastewater Master Plan. All right. Now we're going to take a quick look at the history of rates. As we start looking at this, staff decided that we would break out water and wastewater and break it out again between some structures that I will talk about here in a second. This will help us visualize and understand the historical rates and address water rates and wastewater rates separately. Both water and wastewater rates have seen rate structure changes, which we'll see here in a second, which is also being shown in the following slides. So this first run from 2004 to 2007 or 13, sorry, is the water rates. This was when we did a 3-tier rate structure. We did the first 1,000 gallons, second 1,000 gallons, and any 1,000 gallons over and above 2,000. And what we've done here on all of these slides is giving you a comparison of what a 5,000 gallon bill would look like. As we look here, we can kind of see from right at 2004 all the way through 2011, rates basically stayed the same. There was very little increase during that time if we look at the 7, 8 years. We're going to next move to the next structure rate, which is what we have today. In 2014, we started doing a fixed monthly charge, and then any 1,000 gallons above that is a usage charge. This new rate structure was reinforced when we did the rate study in 2018, and it confirmed that the fixed rate structure was essential for operations, and the usage portion would be pegged for capital projects. And again, you can see here from about 2014 all the way to, this is a little more flat line, to 2021, 2022, it ran pretty flat. And here's a depiction of what the water cost was from 2004 to 2024. And again, this is just the water portion. And you will see here in between 2013 and 2014 is when we did the new rate structure. Before I move on to wastewater, any questions on that part?
I have a question, Rick.
Sure.
On, between 2017 and 2019, when we paid for the South Interceptor, but the rates stayed relatively flat. How was the South Interceptor for
I'm
funding?
going to get there in about 3 minutes.
All right.
That
Sorry.
South Interceptor was on the sewer side. So I'll get there in just a couple
I'll
seconds.
stick with the class. Thank you.
No problem. All right, now we're going to look at wastewater. Wastewater has followed the same rate structure. In the beginning, 2004 to 2014, it was on a 3-tiered structure. This is different than what the memo went out on Thursday on. The memo said the wastewater structure changed in 2017. Subsequent to that memo, we were able to dig up and find out that it actually happened in 2014. This was a collaborative effort between all the admin directors, and going back, some of us weren't here, most of us weren't here during this time. Going back and finding the history was not always straightforward. So after that memo went out saying 2017, we realized that the wastewater did change in 2015-14 or 2014-15. And here you will see, Ron, in 13 and 14, this is when the board made a decision to start raising rates for that South Interceptor.
Yeah, that was Adam Neighbor and Bob and those guys.
Yep.
See that, Steve, when did Steve start? 11, 12, 10? Yeah, that's when they really started looking at it hard.
And in addition to that South Interceptor, also on their mind was the 144th Street bypass and lift station, which is just now going. That was in 2013-14 when we had the increase in the wastewater
Yeah,
rates.
they started talking about it way
Yeah.
before that, but.
So that 144th Street, I just want to make sure I heard that right. 2013 and 14.
That was
This is
part of the subject at that time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so here we are in 2025, finally.
Yeah, I know Adam started in, I think Adam started in, Adam and that board started in 12, and that was one of the things he had asked me about in 18, is progress on that. So he's on the board 6 years with Charlie.
So the hope of that obviously was to have that in before any development started, but there are unfortunate circumstances we don't have to rehash.
Okay. Before we move on to the second rate structure, you definitely see that wastewater rates kind of remain flat until they made that decision. So in November of 2015 is when we started the new rate structure. And again, that was what we have current. We have a fixed monthly fee as well as a usage rate per 1,000 gallons. And as you can see, in 2018, 19 is when we started making some changes to that rate structure.
Yeah, and one of the main changes for those that weren't there, our meter fee was based on, it was flat for everybody, commercials, residential, whatever. So if you had a 6-inch, 8-inch, Dave, what's our biggest, 12, 8? So if we had an 8-inch meter that cost us a lot of money, I'm sure it costs more than our 2-inch and 1-inch. They paid the same flat rate. So if one of the districts, somebody's big meter went out, we were on the hook to replace it, and they were paying the same rate as your house. So,
And that change was implemented with the initial rate study that we did with Riftelis.
yeah. So that's why you see that light green get a little bit of growth too.
Right. You hit escape. We hit escape on keyboard.
Gotta click over.
Maybe again. There you go. Sorry. And here is the wastewater cost per 5,000 gallons from 2004 through 2024. This has been the increase on the wastewater side only. Again, pretty good visual of where those rates stayed consistent for many, many years. Next up, we are combining both water and wastewater rates at the 5,000 gallon example for that 20-year period. And again, roughly around 2020, 2021 is when we start making these changes to ramp up for the infrastructure advances. And I put this slide in here, this is what we looked at last year. This is looking at 2024 rates of our surrounding communities and taking a quick look to see where Smithville lands.
I know Kearney just did increases and Riverside just had increases.
Rick,
And Gladstone is also.
out of curiosity, so these are all cities that produce their own water, is that correct?
No, it is not based on how it's provided. It's just based on what the rates are in the surrounding
Liberty was
communities.
a mix until recently, right? And then Kearney is a mix, I believe, or was.
Gladstone is KC Mo.
Flat
Parkville.
Cities, Water District, or KC Mo,
Parkville and Riverside are both American Water.
American Water. And then KC is KC.
Kearney was a lot of wells, aren't they? Yep. Kearney was
Aquifers, yeah.
a lot of wells.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right.
Ooh, pretty.
Moving on to what we've been implementing over the last 5 or 6 years in the replacement and rehabilitation projects. Over the past 5 years, the city has made advances in both the replacement and rehabilitation programs. First up is the sewer line maintenance. Prior to 2020, most of our lines are clay tile pipe, which is not the best pipe to be working with. As we replace and repair a lot of those pipes, it does get better. But then in 2020, we started the slip line program, and you can see a dramatic decrease in the monthly maintenance of of doing this. Currently, we are down to one line that needs to be maintenance.
Is that the jetter check that we have to go and hit it with, or?
Yeah, and that's why Dave's here, Dave can.
I love Dave coming and talking to us about all this stuff they have to blow out of lines.
I mean, 5 years ago, you guys were running about 20.
Mike, Chuck, microphone.
Dave, about 5 years ago, you were running about 20 lines pretty consistently just to make sure they don't get backed up.
Right there. You get the podium.
Is it on?
Yep.
Yeah, monthly, we would do up to 20 that we did, routinely. We had to do them every month. That doesn't include all the backups and everything else that we did have.
Right, and so,
Emergency backups.
and so today we're down to one that's on the list to do pretty regularly.
One to do monthly, and then I think, I didn't get the, emergency ones we had for the emergency call-ins, but I think we only had a handful, like maybe 5 last year.
I know there's one here.
Yeah, in 1 year. They were actually backed up too, so.
Our line.
That
not
was
the
service
city
line. That was
It
service line, not his line.
It's on us.
So what is that one? Is that one line in the slip line this year, or is it one we?
I believe so.
It's gonna be for next year, cause it
Okay.
requires a manhole being installed. There's only a
Oh.
manhole at one
Yeah.
end, so
Oh.
it can't pull the line through. So we actually have to have a manhole installed. So that'll be done next year's project.
And the new manholes are what, 6 foot, so they weigh a
I
lot?
don't know how deep that is. How deep is it? Oh, 6 foot diameter? No, they're 4.
4.
Yeah.
4 foot diameter, and it's only about 5 foot deep, so it's not gonna be
Okay.
that cost, it's not gonna cost a whole lot.
We're not bringing a crane in like we have to up at Greyhawk.
And we've talked about this before. We've hit most of the older lines. We're working through that.
From what I have gathered, and I haven't plotted on a map yet, I think we've slip lined about 85% of the old clay tile lines in town. The old clay tile lines are the ones that are the really problematic ones, and you can see in the one picture, they're fractured and everything else. You pull that new line through there, and it's like a brand new pipe. So I'm thinking about 85% is what we have.
So
Got a little bit more left.
a question for you or Chuck, and I kind of know the answer. If we didn't slip line and we dug that whole pipe up, on average, how much more time does it take to do that versus slip lining?
To replace it, dig
Yeah,
it up?
yeah.
Oh, lots more time, weeks more time, and the cost
If we can
is, the
get that
cost
deep.
is exponential. Especially because a lot of our lines are under the roads.
With 150,000 a year, we can usually get about 4,400 feet of pipe slip line. I think the one job that we did on winter, I think that was only like a couple 100 feet, and I think it was pushing 100.
Yeah.
So it's big difference.
And then you gotta wait for the road to get fixed and
Yes.
dig deep and.
Well, and the inconvenience to the general public just for digging up the road, you know, block the road, you close access. Not to mention all the other utilities that end up, you know, getting moved or relocated just because they have to be in order to put a new line in. So, yeah, the in situ form saves a lot of time and money.
Cause we did a full replacement on 4th Street Terrace also, right?
We did. And it took a lot of time.
I just did some quick math, so I want to make sure I'm right here. 150,000 a year, about 4,400. We talking linear feet, yeah. So it works out to about $34 per linear foot.
That's what our bids are,
Yeah.
$34, $35. Yep.
No,
Especially when it's 8 and 12 inch and whatever, right? Yeah.
Majority are 8 inch.
Yeah, go price some 8-inch pipe and let me know. And then getting deep enough. That was one of the problems we ran into, right? We have to go 30, 40, 50 feet deep sometimes.
Well, not quite that deep, but they,
How deep was the interceptor?
oh, the interceptor's deep.
That one's deep.
That one's deep.
Yeah.
Comes into the wastewater plant at 42 foot.
Yeah. That one's a deep one.
And it's a big pipe that had a big hole, so, yeah, cool.
And those two things are some of the things that you see. You see this line maintenance line going down. You see the cost going up because we've added those costs. We also have the cost of the debt service for that interceptor project.
But it's cut down on staff time. I mean, what did it take you to
Dave, what
clear
were you
those 20
saying
lines?
earlier
What's that on,
this week about response? At one point in time, in like 2020, you had talked about the need potentially? How much staff time would jetting a line take a week?
Yeah, so we used to take roughly about 2 days, 2 employees to do the monthly lines. With everything else going on, it was discussed, if we wouldn't have been doing these slip line projects with the emergencies and everything else, and the water line replacements, by now we'd need more staff. We do so much daily that just pops up for the community, that it takes up the majority of the people all day long. So to do these repairs and this extra maintenance, we definitely require more people by now.
Awesome.
Thanks, Dave.
If you've never seen Dave's table of things that shouldn't be in the toilet, stop by the sewer department.
It would be shocking.
Cell phones somehow get down there. I don't know.
All right.
Is
looking
this
at-
the opportunity to say don't flush wipes? Sorry.
Don't flush wipes at City Hall either.
Moving on to water main breaks. Historically, the infrastructure was constructed with cast iron, which is not very durable to temperature changes and corrosion. When we do fix these, it is being replaced with PVC. As we see here on this trend line, which is decreasing over time, the water main breaks have been getting fewer. We had one big jump in 2020 at 49 breaks. That was related to a very long cold spell that we had,
It was cold and everybody was home.
and cold in everybody's home. Then it does increase a little bit right afterwards. This is due to the stress that the pandemic had on our water system with people being home and just more usage. From about 15 to 20, the projects that we did knock off were at Hawthorne, Main, and Bridge Street. And then more recent projects were on Quincy, Highland, and Woods. And by having less main breaks, this results in a shift to enhance our system as a whole. As Dave alluded, time and money could be shifted to other areas. All right, going over a quick summary of what we've done so far. Projects, as I mentioned, were more reactive, focused on emergency maintenance and repairs. And as we maintenance projects transition to replacement and rehabilitation programs, which we saw in the slip line and the water main breaks. With the rates, basically all we can say is there was some inconsistent growth in both the water and wastewater rates. And finally, the recent projects that have helped our maintenance and repairs decrease resulted in the focus on the larger infrastructure projects that we have going on. And again, those projects are highlighted in both the water and wastewater master plans. All right, Jack is going to start talking about development, and then I will pick back up with impact fees. Keep this on, or do I have to hold?
Make one other comment as well. One thing that we talked about at the staff level, and it's not really reported here, but one thing to keep in mind as we think about, those rates and the inconsistency in those increases, but also that flat line on the projects that were completed and the maintenance costs historically, as we've become more proactive about addressing those lines. The proactivity also has come at a time when we've seen rising costs on everything we've seen. We weren't investing in our infrastructure in the early teens when prices comparatively were lower. So we've got a twofold issue at work here. Lack of work and now a need for that maintenance and repair to the system and higher costs. So just want to make sure we keep that in the back of our minds as we move forward.
Well, and Cynthia got a good point. It's not only just the cost of the material, it's the electricity cost, right? I think oftentimes when we think about what drives our water system and our sewer system is electricity. So, and that's, yep. I don't think we get a break for being a municipality and buying electricity, right?
Nope.
Didn't think so. Yep.
You pay like $5,000 a pump station per year in electricity. We pay for streetlight electricity. Good. Bill for that one too. Yeah. But if we go to gravity, there's less electric bills, right?
Yep.
Jack?
Yes, sir. Going to start going over the development impact fee discussion. One of the things that, this is a graph that shows the 2004 to 2024 building permits. These are only single-family building permits, so they generate the, for years was the 24 and 2,800 impact fees, water and sewer, per building permit. And those impact fees would then be able to go to projects. You can see the spikes throughout in the early 2000s, mid 2000s. Then you have that precipitous drop that was 2007, 8 that took us down, you know, and there were 5, 6 years there where we were in the 30 permit range, you know, and 30 times 5,200 is not a ton of money to go to impact fees. And then we had 3 years of substantial growth there. And then, of course, it dropped off again. And now we are, for example, the last year is 2024's total number of 92. Those generate now more impact fees, but they are still, you know, we're at 3,100 and 2,800. The 20 years you see, there has been no change in the sewer impact fees, so kind of a significant issue. For future development, over the next 6, 7 years, and I apologize, I didn't change that to 25, it says 24 because this was updated data from the retreat and I just saw that. But we have Clay Creek Meadows that was approved by this board just a few months ago. They are under construction for phase one, and so shortly we'll have phase 2 under construction. There's 216 units, dwelling units up north. Landmark Farms was approved in January of this year. They've notified us they're going to put a pause on that for 2 years. So that 287 units comes off. And then we have Greyhawk has been approved for phases 5 through 10, which would be another 165 units. Until we have other developments that are proposed and coming in, and this focuses primarily on the north stuff. That's where we have our biggest issues. But until we have newer projects coming in, that's what you're going to be looking at, estimates on the north end of town, most likely. We will have more growth in the south. For example, of the 92 permits, 64 of them in last calendar year were for the townhomes project that's under construction now. And each of those will pay an impact fee, but it'll be based on their water meter size, not individual units, and they have bigger water meters for each building. So we get more revenue, but it is not as much as for individuals. We're looking at more apartments down south as well. So the development, we anticipate we're going to have substantial continued growth, depending on the economy, obviously. The capacity status, the purpose of all the north discussion is that's where our biggest issue is. You may recall last year we discussed the development capacity on the North Force Main, which is where most of the independent or individual single-family detached housing is. We had a total of 265 dwelling units based upon the wastewater master plan in 2021. Greyhawk subdivisions, phase 3A, B, and 4, plus Clay Creek Meadows, phases 1 and 2, took off 254 of those, which means we have 11 dwelling unit capacity on our north force main. And that's until we do one of two things, or both things eventually. First is the replacement of and rehabilitation of the Wildflower Pump Station. And then that's going to add 320 lots. And for some reason, I did poor math. That says 333, but that's obviously not correct. And then the second half will be the Owens Branch Phase 1, which would run from the plant, and it's an interceptor. Takes everything off of force and makes it all gravity, saving on that electricity mentioned earlier. The first phase is what's proposed to go in, the first segment of Phase 1 is set to go in next year. And that will go from the plant to just north of KK Highway. And then segment 2 would go from KK along Owens up around to just to the east side of 169. And then Phase 3 would take it from there up to Hillcrest, where the intersection of the Oak Point Force Main and the Harbortown or Harborview lines intersect. Once that intersection goes away, the growth up north is fine. The Wildflower stuff is interesting from the standpoint that we had it resolved with Lakeside Farms coming in, and their project was going to take that station completely out and build a new, bigger one for their waste plus Wildflower. But they're postponing for 2 years. That timing kills us on some of our other commitments. So we are going to go back to the original plan, which was the Grayhawk subdivision was required in 2004 that they would have to upgrade the Wildflower Station whenever it became available or became necessary. That agreement assumed a whole bunch of different growth up north. And it was estimated in 2004 that would likely occur in 2010. Growth didn't occur like everyone thought. Starting in 2006, 2007, the wheels fell off. That changed everything. So based upon that, Grayhawk was put on hold. You don't have to do anything. Well, now we're at a point that we are down to 11 units. They're going to have to do that in the coming months, year, to do their upgrade of that Wildflower Station. That brings us, as we said, to 333 units. Assuming 30 units after that's on, assuming 30 units are built each year thereafter, that'll get us 10 years out before we're again out of capacity, which gives us more time to work on the Owens Branch. We'll go back to you?
No, can
Okay.
you, Jack, before that, can you go back to your graph?
No, but Rick can show me how.
Linda can just hit the arrows for you. She can go back a couple slides.
I don't know how to, there we go.
Yeah.
There we go.
So that, when we start that little spike in the 90s, right, that's Diamond Crest and Harbors,
Forest Oaks.
Forest Oaks.
Yeah.
And then we were talking about capacity and planning. We had, what, 550 that they had platted around Eagle Heights?
Oh, yeah.
Lake Meadows was gonna be another,
Yep, 900 homes total in that subdivision area.
and when were those approved? In that 2000s time period
Yeah.
during that big spike?
Yeah, 2000. Lake Meadows was approved in 2002, 2003 because they redid they built the Diamond Crest pump station when they did their first phase. So that was 2003, which is now going to be somewhat rehabilitated by Clay Creek.
So, yeah, the dip's probably a good thing since they didn't really build the
Jack, were you
gravity back
here?
then.
Were you here when Rollins came on? What,
I came here right when Rollins started.
okay, roughly 197 homes, something like that.
Yeah,
Yep.
around 200, something
Yep,
like that.
yep.
And original Harbor View was built in the county, right? It wasn't,
Old Harbor View.
Harbor
I
View.
think was, eventually annexed in, but all of the rest was built in.
And then Harbor Lakes is only a third built out, right? The other 2/3 or so got
There were,
farmland.
yeah, there were 200 plus, 200, 300 plus homes that were supposed to go in there.
So was the plan back then to get to gravity sooner or?
Well,
do
in
we have-
2004, 5, and 6, the concept they were talking about was it's either got to be an interceptor or another force main paralleling it to keep the capacity alive. 2007 or 8, market falls apart. It's, well, we just, at this point in time, we need to focus on the interceptor because it'll give us 50 years of life versus that force main that would go away sooner.
But when they approved those subdivisions, there was no capacity.
Well, there was no capacity issue because the force mains were all brand new.
Right.
And so they're there. Now all of those subdivisions have built out. And, you know, we're at 265 total units as of 2021. So,
So we were a couple thousand short of where it probably needed to be.
yeah, there would have been, and I will say, if the 500 or the 900 went in at Lake Meadows or Davenport Farms, they would have had development agreements that would require additional work.
Right.
But obviously, all of those have expired. So anything they do has to come back anyway. And we will address any of their work to keep our system alive. That's why that's why those development agreements for, we make sure they improve the system so we can keep going.
Hey, Jack, with the 2-year pause on the development and with that really puts a more financial strain on Grayhawk, wouldn't it?
No,
Because-
Grayhawk wouldn't be impacted. They have probably 3 or 4 years worth of vacant lots for building. So they're not going to have any issue.
Right, but with them rebuilding the Wildflower Pump Station,
They're
right?
already on the hook for that.
Yeah, part of the original development agreement was with Lakeside Farms.
Right,
Grayhawk was going to be required to pay the cost of it, but to the city, and then the city was crediting that to Lakeside Farms because they were going to completely get rid of that station. So
Right.
the improvements Grayhawk would have to be made would be done in a different fashion by building a completely new station and doubling its capacity.
Yeah, their development agreement's pretty extensive. They still have to build a roundabout. They have to do a few things.
Grayhawk,
so,
yeah.
so I was gonna, my next question is does that trigger the roundabout any way, shape or form at that, or that's all
Yeah.
paused until X, right?
Well, their next phase will require a secondary exit, and their layout is such that the roundabout is the only, unless they do the south exit and they don't connect. But they have to have a second exit. They've
Right.
got too many units to
Right.
continue.
Okay, thank you.
They're also gonna go out towards the winery. Their subdivision goes all the way to
Yeah.
that street.
Yeah, they have 2 entrances left to construct, the roundabout at Bridgeport,
Mhm.
and then a new one that's not shown anywhere on 172nd Street that would.
Okay. Got it, thank you.
Mhm.
Any others before we move on to impact fees?
No, I like that. It's a good graph. Thank you for getting that.
All right. As Jack alluded, we have impact fees that are paid both on the water and wastewater side. This is used for new development to help fund the construction or expansion of water and wastewater infrastructure needed for growth. And this ensures that new development helps pay for the increased cost on our infrastructure. So just looking at the top half first for water and impact fees, that was at 2,400 from 2004 through 2020, when it was increased to 3,100. In the past, prior to 2020, some of the projects that were used, the water impact fees, was Whiskey Ridge Loop in 2016. and the Bridge Street project in 2017 and 18. And right now, we are slowly saving up. This is a fund that obviously only gets funded by building permits. And right now, for 2026, we have slated to spend 700,000 out of this fund for the Maple Ave and River Crossing. Move to the bottom half where we have the wastewater impact fees. This has been $2,800 since 2004. We have not changed this rate. In the past, as you saw on that first bump of the projects was the South Interceptor. This was a project that we used wastewater impact fees on at that time. Currently, the next time we have slated to use impact water fees or wastewater impact fees is in 2027 for the Owens Branch Phase 1.
Hey, Rick, how do the wastewater, how do the water and wastewater impact fees of the city compare to the other surrounding communities? Like getting ahead again?
We sent this
You
out.
are on fire. Right here. This is where we stand with some of our surrounding that does have the impact fees. So Platte City, Kearney, Platte County, Raymore are slightly below where we're at the rates.
Yeah, we building houses in Olathe.
Those are, yes, those are some outside outliners. But just showing what we compare to some of our current size communities as well as Johnson County and Olathe.
Couple things to note here too, and Rick, am I gonna step on your toes on anything? Do you have anything else
Go
on that? Few things to highlight on this. Number one is that we're really in the ballpark. You look at, we're pretty close there with most of those in that 5,000 range for total. We're all kind of clumped in that area. We've not increased our rates significantly in a while. You're going to see some discussion about this as we go through the budget process. Also, if you look at those areas where they are higher, those are in higher growth areas as well. There is an impact on that growth to those cities. Again, I'll talk about the fact that costs have increased. That's why we want to look at increases there. The other item to note is we were talking earlier about some communities where we compared our water and sewer rates. You don't see Parkville or Riverside or Gladstone on this list. They don't provide their utilities, so they don't have those costs to those systems. So that's why they're not on this list.
In places like Raytown, who have not had, they have fees, but they have
Have
not
not
added.
had growth
Yeah,
in.
they didn't add a water account for like, what, 10 years, I think they said? Something like that.
Something like that,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, yeah, so you don't see.
Rick, just a clarification point for some that may not know. These impact fees, and they go greater than water or sewer, are per lot, per house. It is
Correct.
not a
Per connection.
one time. That is
Connection,
correct.
per
It is a
connection,
per
right.
connection. Yeah.
So the residential is where we would be bringing in higher money. When it goes to a multifamily, then you kind of lose out on those impact fees because it might be one connection for 4 different families.
Yeah, like Clay Creek.
And the thing also, to your point, I think as well, we recognize this has an impact on homeowners. Directly, the cost of building a home is related to these costs. So we have to balance the costs on the system and the cost to existing residents of that impact of new uses or new housing, while balancing the cost to the new and still trying to balance and be cognizant of housing costs and affordability. So there's significant amount of balance there.
So Jack, are impact fees based on meter size, or is it? Because like, I know there's houses in Greyhawk that needed like a 2-inch or whatever, so they're higher.
Yeah. Well, I don't know that they needed it, but they wanted it. so
Well, they
put
wanted
in.
it, yeah. Multiple.
So yeah, they pay more. The system was set up in 2004, 5, 6, somewhere in there. A standard residential, so 5/8, 3/4, 1 inch, anywhere in there is the 24, 28. Excuse me, now it was set up at 24 and 28. A 2 inch was double that. A 4 inch was double that.
So if it's like the situation with Clay Creek where they have 4-on-1, they're probably not on a 1 inch line, or are they?
I think they went to twos, weren't they, Dave?
They're on 2 inch for 4 houses, right? So
Yeah.
their impact fee is higher, even though it's 4 units.
Right,
You're paying double a normal house.
To the city, it's half.
right. But paying double,
Saves them half.
yes, saves them half.
Right.
So, and that evaluation was done back when multifamily of any type, from a zoning perspective, not construction perspective. So duplexes, triplexes, fourplexes weren't happening in Smithville, period.
They're built in the 70s and 80s, and then they kind of stopped.
Yeah. Well, yeah, they just, the city decided we don't want that kind of housing here. So we didn't build them, and I think that was the evaluation concept. They were thinking about single-family detached housing and what that impact was. Also, during that time frame, we didn't have commercial growth. Zero.
Yeah.
So.
All right. Wrapping up the slides, we're going to talk a little bit about current and future direction. First up, I'd just like everybody, we'll just kind of go over these unit numbers real quick for future development. We have 156 units that have been platted, but permits not been issued. 788 units that have been zoned, but no final plats have been filed. 621 units that have had initial development discussions and anticipated in the near future. And then other than multifamily, which is the Clay Creek and Eagle Ridge, the last subdivision created with over 100 lots was Greyhawk in 2004.
So Dan, your other question. Harbor Lakes, Harborview, Diamond Crest, all prior to 04.
Just looking over a quick overview of both the water and wastewater sides. The water treatment plant expansion project will accommodate future growth. The wastewater growth will have an impact on our future with the completion of the expansion. Central Smithville will add about 20 years of capacity. South Smithville with the 144th Street pump station will add 10+ years of capacity. And then North Smithville, an area of concern with current growth and potential additional growth. Still a little bit up in the air on how that'll proceed. These last couple of slides I kind of took from our work session in February when we brought to you what staff had prepared for the projects that we have for the near future, as well as cash flows. So again, just kind of highlighting some of these very large projects that we have going on over the next couple of years. Just the West Bypass, 144th Street lift station, the Owens Branch gravity line, the water treatment plant improvements, and both the water plant expansion and wastewater plant expansion have significant cost associated with those. And as we alluded, the further we go out, the higher these costs will get. And one more slide from our February presentation was what we projected our cash flows to look like. We did make one slight change with 144th Street coming in higher than expected. That first COP that we have slated for 2025 is now 7.5 million, and that was at 7 million.
Rick, I appreciate you, sorry, Cynthia.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, I appreciate you putting this together. What's interesting about this I had to enlarge it because of one of my eyes, but two, to make sure that I was seeing these numbers correctly. The expenses are always going to outweigh our revenue. There's no going back, right? I mean, there's no way we can even that out as far as our expenses because of these projects, right? We need these
That
projects in order to
expense line
grow.
includes the capital projects
Right,
that are
right.
going to be incorporated. So you do have a piece in there that is the operating expense.
Correct.
Our revenues should outpace our operating expense in every year, since this is on the water side. And then the additional major outlay project you'll see down at that bottom line is what we have slated for that year, which is included in that expense line.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you doing that. I just wanted to clarify that. That expense is including the
Right.
capital project.
That's including capital projects, that's including the cost of debt, that's including everything we knew at the point in time. And it kind of just is, whole presentation kind of just points or provides the picture that, from 2004 to 2017, rates, projects were pretty nil. Not much increase in rates. Projects weren't being completed. It was more on the maintenance and repair. And now that we have some master plans in place, now we're going to start updating our infrastructure.
Rick, I just want to go back to something and just kind of clarify that on something that Alderman Hartman just said. He said, if I heard it right, that expenses will always be higher than revenue. So
Our
just to
revenue will be always higher than our operating expenses. But in
Okay.
this scenario, it's going to be reversed because it's including the capital projects that are on that last
Got it.
line,
Got it.
which will be supplemented by debt.
Our plan.
And there's our plan. And there's really no other option other than, because of the size of these projects, we are going to have to tackle them sooner or later.
Got it. Thank you.
And then that debt financing discussion goes back to our February discussion where our bond counsel and financial advisors were here talking through those processes and the options that we have that we'll continue to review. As we've talked for several years now, we had anticipated the need to do the COPs, the certificates of participation for the 144th Street Interceptor project. We had actually anticipated having to go out for that debt back in '23. But because of project delays, but also because of additional funding we've received that's kind of taken care of the increase in costs. Working with Representative Graves, we were able to get additional funding from the federal government to assist with that project. That has delayed our need for the issuance of the debt. On the agenda this evening will be the reimbursement resolution, which basically acknowledges our intent to work to issue that debt and outlines those projects for which we can reimburse ourselves. That is the first step that we take in that process. Later this week, staff has a call with our financial advisor and we will begin that process. The sale of those COPs will happen later this year. We don't have a time on that yet because that's the plan that we'll be working through with the financial advisors later this week, and we'll bring that information to you all. But there are multiple steps and approvals that you all have to take in ensuring that occurs. So we'll keep that process moving.
So Rick, I'm going to throw you a curveball on these financials. I know recently the water district put out some bond issuances to connect into a different supplier. What does this look like if we're not supplying water to them for that extra capacity and the discounted water that we sell them? So not for this meeting, for a future meeting.
Okay.
Because rough back of the napkin math's about 250,000 a year that they get in discounts, and we have to supply a line to them and bill them and everything else that it takes to do that. And that's water we could be selling to our residents and not increasing capacity because their capacity increased, and they obviously have other plans.
Okay.
So,
Not to
Bring that back.
be over dramatic here, but again, highlighting 13 years, the board did nothing. Jack, did our population grow in those 13 years? Yeah.
Not huge amounts, but yes, every year we've gained residences.
Well, and also if you look at that graph too, how many of those years did we not have property tax because we wanted the growth? All of them is the answer. When did you put property tax back on?
Well, to be honest, I didn't put anything in.
Well, I mean, when did you do that? When did you do the
But it
math?
occurred at the end of 2007.
Yeah, because you had to do the math to calculate it out on where we were at based on the Hancock adjustments.
23 years of no property taxes had to be recalculated to bring our rate.
So not
down.
only did we have growth and did nothing, we didn't have a lot of revenue to do anything with anyway, other than impact fees and.
Well, the more negative thing, to be quite frank, was not only did we have growth, we had annexation. We were annexing more land and no property taxes to pay for any of the services that we had to start providing.
Voluntary annexations, not forced annexations, right?
Oh, yeah.
People
no.
that
We were
wanted to
having,
be,
we were having 35 annexations a month from 89, 90-ish to 92, 93. That's how we got all the way to Kansas City.
Yeah, doing nothing is not the answer. As much as it pains me to look at this number,
and to drive around a detour for 3 blocks.
yeah.
Dan has made 285 trips to the other side of the river in this last 2 weeks. Pretty sure that's what his mile log shows. But he's recycling cans nonstop and he just one at a time. Since the Boy Scouts are here, reminding me of the cans, so. Okay, awesome. Anything else?
Anything else?
Y'all have been quiet. Marv. Melissa, this is your wheelhouse. You got anything?
No, I think you did a very good presentation. I appreciate it. So we all know that this needs to be done. It's a hard pill to swallow, but we need to do it.
And thanks again for finding that pump station back in the day. It was on the tax rolls for us because we didn't put that on our.
Now that was an interesting time.
All right, with that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to adjourn work session.
Thank you. Do I have a second? All in favor of adjourning, say aye.
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 Opposed, say no. Stand adjourned. I'll give you guys 5 minutes in case you need to grab a break real quick. So we'll start a couple minutes.